There once was this completely ordinary guy named Arab, living in an everyday city. I'm talking a totally simple life, right? No special powers, no grand ambitions, just the same mundane routine, day in and day out. But here's the thing. Araf had this weird, nagging feeling inside him that he was meant for something bigger, something massive. Then, one night, as he's walking home alone, this bizarre, blinding light flashes across the sky, and out of nowhere, an ancient, battered book drops right out of the sky, landing directly at his feet.
Now, right there on the cover of this strange book, it read, "When a world forgets its hero, a new hero is born." And the absolute second Arav's fingers brush against that cover, bam, the entire world just freezes. The wind stops. Every single sound vanishes into thin air. And slowly, a massive, glowing portal tears open right in front of him. A booming voice echoes out, saying, "You have been chosen. Chosen for a world where the very existence of humanity is hanging by a thread." Arav squeezes his eyes shut, and when he opens them,
He's standing in a completely different universe. We're talking floating islands in the sky, actual literal magic, and terrifying monsters that hunt humans for sport. But here is the wildest part. The people in this strange world, they've been waiting for him. An old man walks right up to Arav, takes one look and says, "You're finally here." The exact person written about in the ancient prophecy. Naturally, Arav is completely stunned. He's like, "Me? No way, I'm just a normal kid." And the old man just smiles and replies, "Exactly, because a true hero never actually believes they're a hero." What Arav doesn't realize, though, is that his arrival has just kicked off a massive, epic war. Because lurking in the shadows is someone else who's been waiting for him. The absolute most dangerous enemy this world has ever seen.
Okay, well, let's dive right into this. If you are a fan of anime, fantasy novels, or really any kind of speculative fiction, hearing Arav's story probably just gave you a massive sense of déjà vu, right? It sounds super familiar, and that is exactly what we are going to unpack today. We're going to dissect this specific narrative, figure out why we are also completely obsessed with it, and look at the absolute masterclass techniques writers use to take this familiar setup and make it truly unforgettable. So let's kick things off with our very first core concept. Welcome to the Isekai.
Now, isekai is actually a Japanese term that literally translates to different world or another world. And just like the definition says, it's a narrative where our main character gets suddenly transported into an alternate reality where they have to survive, explore, or level up and gain new powers. This is super closely tied to a concept by literary scholar Fair Mendelssohn called portal quest fantasy. Basically, a character crosses some sort of threshold into a brand new universe, and that crossing acts as the ultimate catalyst for world building. Whether it's Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole into Wonderland or Arav stepping through that glowing magical portal, this transition is the key that unlocks a whole new adventure. But here's where it gets really interesting. In modern writer communities, like over on Reddit, there is a massive debate going on right now about how to handle this trope today. On one hand, you have your cliché power fantasy isekai. This is heavily influenced by massive 2000s hits like Sword Art Online. You know the drill. The protagonist is basically a loser back on Earth, they pop into a new world, instantly get crazy video game-style powers, and suddenly they've got a whole harem following them around. But on the flip side, you have writers who are desperately trying to subvert all of that. They're pushing for narratives where the character's past life on Earth actually matters. For example, one Reddit user suggested breaking the basic trope by letting the protagonist travel back and forth between both worlds. That way, you build some really fantastic tension and emotional depth between their old life and their new one. Now, bubbling underneath all of this isekai magic is a totally time-tested mythological structure, the hero's journey. These specific stages were famously codified by Christopher Vogler, and they are as much a psychological journey as a physical one. Think about Arav's path here. He starts out in his ordinary world, just that plain, boring city. Then, that magical book dropping from the sky, that is his literal call to adventure. At first, he doubts himself, right? He says, "I'm just a normal kid." But then he takes the leap, and that's stage 4, crossing the threshold, right through the portal. The moment he gets there, he enters the meeting the mentor stage, where that mysterious old man gives him validation and insight for the crazy challenges ahead. It is just a completely flawless blueprint for storytelling. But remember, Arav isn't just some random tourist passing through. He's been told he's the savior. And that brings us to our next major trope, the chosen one hero. According to the writing experts over at The Novelry, the reason we keep coming back to the chosen one trope over and over is because it offers a sense of structural certainty in a totally chaotic world. It just sits so naturally on the classic 3-act structure. In Act 1, the hero has flawed potential, just like how Arav doubted his own identity. Then in Act 2, they grapple with the absolutely overwhelming burden of their new destiny. And finally, in Act 3, they fully embrace their roles so they can conquer their fatal flaw. Overall, it's a deeply satisfying journey of gaining personal agency and power. However, let's be real, readers get tired of lazy execution pretty fast. So to keep this hero archetype feeling fresh, authors have to toss in subversions. You could make your protagonist the reluctant hero, kind of like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Or maybe the destiny is actually a terrible burden, like in Leigh Bardugo's Ninth House, where being special actually makes the protagonist way more vulnerable. You could even introduce multiple chosen ones who have to share the mission, or create a morally ambiguous destiny, where the characters honestly don't know if the prophecy is going to save them or completely destroy everything. Which leads us perfectly into arguably the most important part of world building: prophecies and magic systems. To make sure Arav's prophecy doesn't just completely ruin the plot, we have to look at this absolutely crucial quote. Make prophecies ambiguous enough to create tension, but not so obvious that they spoil your plot. Writer Brianna Sarvovsky argues that prophecies aren't inherently bad. It's lazy prophecies that are the problem. Arav's prophecy shouldn't just be some convenient step-by-step script for him to follow. There needs to be a real danger of it being wrong, misinterpreted, or even manipulated by the bad guys. The prophecy should complicate his life and force him to make incredibly hard choices so that his agency stays intact. We don't want him just gliding toward victory on a magical conveyor belt, right? And when it comes to the actual magic Arav is going to use or face off against, we've got to pull some insights from Timothy Hickson's incredible masterclass book on writing and world building. Hickson brilliantly explains exactly how the rules of your magic system can totally make or break your narrative tension. So Hickson breaks magic systems down into two main categories: hard and soft magic. Hard magic is predictable, it's consistent. Because the reader understands the rules, the protagonist can actually use it to solve problems in a really satisfying way, and the audience never feels like it's just a cheap trick. On the flip side, you have soft magic, which is mysterious and totally unpredictable. Now, Hickson notes that you should never use soft magic to solve a problem, but it is absolutely phenomenal for causing tension. Just think about the Mind Flayer and Stranger Things. We don't really understand its soft magic powers, which is exactly why it feels like such a terrifying, formidable villain. So, Arav's greatest enemy? They should definitely wield that kind of soft, unpredictable magic to keep the stakes incredibly high. Now think back to that strange, glowing book that fell from the sky for Arav. Details like that aren't just there randomly. This is where another brilliant concept from Hickson applies: foreshadowing, specifically Chekhov's gun. It's a simple rule: if you show a gun hanging on the wall in Act 1, it absolutely has to be fired by Act 3. That magic book needs a deeply satisfying narrative payoff later in the plot. Early objects or details like that give the reader a subconscious hint of what's to come, seamlessly connecting Arav's early journey all the way to his epic climax. So, how do we actually bring all these analytical tools together? By intentionally subverting fantasy cliches. Okay, so we have our structural map: a subverted chosen one, an ambiguous prophecy, and a rock-solid magic system. But the ultimate secret to building real, non-cliché tension lies in bringing the stakes down to a personal level. Hickson explains that with Save the World stories, readers often get apocalyptic fatigue. We instinctively know the world isn't actually going to end. We're just too used to the planet getting a happily ever after. So, to build believable tension, stop trying to save the world and make the audience care about saving the characters. Forget the floating islands for a minute. Make the audience terrified about whether Arav's mentor is going to survive the night. The focus has to be on who makes it out alive and whether their sacrifices were truly worth it. By focusing on those intense personal stakes, giving Arav real agency against a mysterious villain, and using our foreshadowing properly, we can take a generic cliché and turn it into an absolute masterpiece. We've taken a normal kid and plugged him into a masterfully crafted narrative engine. So, now that you know the rules of the genre and you understand the complexities of isekai, the hero's journey, and magic systems, how would you finish Arav's story? Will he wholeheartedly embrace his destiny, reject that dark responsibility, or forge a completely new path of his own? Get thinking, and maybe get writing. Until next time, keep exploring the stories behind the stories.